I'm always looking for ways to punch up my blues progressions, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at a sneaky little trick that isn't nearly as complicated to pull off as it sounds. In the past we've covered cool chord tricks like using the diminished seventh as an approach chord, dropping in a 2-5-1 progression, and today we're going to help you create interesting blues chord progressions by using tritone substitutions. Hey, John here with your Tuesday Blues, where each week we come together to talk about one thing: blues guitar. Sometimes that means that we dig into a tutorial, and other times we roll up our sleeves and get to work deepening our understanding of the fretboard, of the instrument, like we're going to do today. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss a lesson. Now let's start unpacking tritone substitutions, which are kind of tricky to understand, but we'll break it down so you can use it to add a little life and maybe even some spontaneity to your blues rhythms. Before we dig in, it's going to help big time if you have a solid working knowledge of basic 12-bar blues, and in particular Roman numeral analysis or the Nashville number system, as a way of understanding a progression in a functional way, kind of irrespective of a key and specific chords, calling a chord by its function like 1, 4, 5, that sort of thing. If you need to get up to speed with that, check out BGI's free Acoustic Blues Jumpstart course that will help you with the basics. Tritone substitutions. Let's start with the easy bit. What is a substitution? Well, chord substitutions are where we swap out a chord for another chord that's meant to function in the same way as the original chord. We're trading something that's expected for something else that's ideally adding cool little musical surprises here and there to keep things interesting. In the most basic 12-bar blues, you expect something like this chord progression. You could see how one might think that playing through a standard 12-bar blues might get a little lifeless after a while. Not me, I didn't say that, but people say that. So chord substitutions are a great way to stick with the tried and true framework, but punch it up a little bit. All right, so now we know what a substitution is. What is a tritone substitution? For a tritone substitution, we'll replace a dominant seventh chord with another dominant seventh chord whose root is a tritone away, or 3 whole steps. Same thing, that's really all a tritone is, an interval where the tones are 3 whole steps apart. The tritone is an important interval, and we talked about it back in Tuesday Blues number 328 as a way to add a little bluesiness to your leads, but here's an example of a tritone interval by itself. Let's take a D note and go up 3 whole steps. So we'll go up 1 whole step, another whole step, and then another. That's an A flat. Here we go, right close to each other. And then together. So now let's take a moment to find tritones on the fretboard. Make sure that you can drop these little dudes in quickly on the fly. So what we have is the root here, and a tritone very close by is just simply up a fret and a string. So 5th string, 4th string, 5th fret, 6th fret. That's a tritone. This little shape where we go up a string and up 1 fret exists on really all of the string pairs except for 1. This is our root, and this is the tritone, the flat 5th, the devil's interval, 3 whole steps, whatever you call it. This is what we're after here for the tritone. And like I said, that works on different string pairs. So if we drop down to a 6 root on the 6th string, and then 5th string, we go up a fret. So we've got 5th fret, 6th fret here. We've got the tritone. So tritone, tritone. Let's do it again. Let's do it again up to the 3rd and 2nd string. That sounds a bit too nice to be the tritone. We need to adjust for the tuning interval of the 2nd string by coming up. There we go. There's that nasty sound, that dissonant sound of the tritone. All right, so the shape looks like that on strings 3 and 2. But if we move to strings 2 and 1 again, we have that familiar shape there. All right, now the cool thing is you can build chords off of that. So if we've got a chord here, that's a dominant 7th chord. There's my root. there's my flat 7, and there's my major third, just leaving out the 5th to play this on these 3 strings, 6, 4, and 3. Right? So if we do that, we can build a 7th chord off of our tritone root. We already know how to find that. It's up a fret and up a string. There we go. There's a dominant 7th chord built off of that root. So it helps certainly to know a little bit about the chord shapes for dominant 7. And I'm just using these bare bones voicings here. But there it is. Now that we know how to find the tritone interval on the strings, and we know how to build at least some basic 7th chord shapes off of our tritone interval, let's put this to work in a 12-bar blues. Here's how we're going to use a tritone sub in bar 4 of a 12-bar blues pattern. Let's play in the key of D for fun, and we'll sub in the A flat for D7. Alright, before we actually play this in a progression, notice how the major third of our D7, F sharp, and the flat 7, the dominant 7th, are a tritone. There's our little shape, right? And also notice that when we switch to the A flat 7, those 2 tones don't move. They are common for these 2 chords. That's part of the magic of the tritone substitution. Now, what actually happens is the function of these 2 notes flips in the 2 chords. So here we have major third, flat 7 in context of a D7, but when we flip to the A flat 7, we've got flat 7, major third. All right? Pretty neat. Okay, now let's hear the substitution in the first 6 bars of a 12-bar blues progression. Pay close attention to bar 4. Here we substituted an expected D7 in bar 4 with an A flat 7, which is 3 whole steps up from the D that we're replacing. So we moved into bar 5 with this G7. Now we're keeping everything dominant here because blues, which kind of helps us to make these substitutions all over the place in a 12-bar blues. Now dropping in this A flat 7 into the mix created a fair amount of tension really in the bass, right? And by the way, I'm fretting this with my thumb over the bass. You could certainly fret these chords like this if you don't want to do that. Totally cool. But we've got a fair amount of tension here because of that A flat 7, and we kind of resolve that by dropping back down a half step into the 4 chord, which is rooted a half step lower. So the bass and these tones actually drop down by a half step. Now this can sound odd when you're hanging out here, maybe even a little bit jarring. If there's too much tension here for your liking, then use this more as a passing chord. And you can get transitionally from your 1 chord down into your 4 chord here in a really bluesy way. Wait, so isn't that just a chromatic movement in the bass? Yes, Pete, it is. You've probably been playing tritone substitutions without even realizing it. Pretty sneaky, huh? But it's important to note that tritone substitutions don't always equal chromatics. It can, but it doesn't have to, and it depends entirely on how you use them. For example, the last 4 bars of a 12-bar blues usually look like this. But if we split measure 9 and 10 and use a tritone sub for the second half of each measure, we get this. Now, notice there was an element of chromaticism when we approached the D7 with that D flat 7, but there isn't really any chromatic movement in the first couple of bars. Not that there's anything wrong with that, that's just not what's happening here. But now let's change the final 2 bars from just D7 to a turnaround based on this. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, pretty standard, but what we're going to do is inject some tritone substitutions here. Listen to what happens. Definitely very chordy, and it might surprise your friends if you throw that out in a jam, outside of some jazz circles, I suppose. But even though this certainly sounds jazzy with that bass movement, I can certainly hear this in a full band context with a more rocking sound, just hammering out those last chords together. It would make for a really powerful turnaround, and maybe something that you don't do all the time, but it would be a great power move occasionally in a 12-bar jam. So now let's groove along to a 12-bar rhythm pattern, summing in a tritone for the 1 chord in bar 4 like we did earlier, and also using it in that fun way in the turnaround. I'm going to play with the rhythm a little bit just to have some fun. Here we go. Hopefully this will give you a deeper understanding of why certain things work, and it might just lead you to using this substitution more and more and add some spontaneity into your rhythm playing. It's one more tool in your toolkit in the blues, and it can help you break out of playing the same old thing. If you want other tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you play better blues, then click or tap right over here, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, practice smart and play on.